The operative thought he committed the perfect crime. He did the PRE operational surveillance. He used military-grade signal jammers to blind Nancy Guthrie's security cameras at exactly 1:47 a.m. He wore tactical gear to hide his face. He thought he was a ghost, but ghosts don't shed. Humans do. For 76 days, the public has been begging for a breakthrough. And in the last 24 hours, the dam has officially broken. National investigative journalist Brian Entin just dropped a bombshell that changes the entire trajectory of this manhunt. Sources confirmed that physical evidence specifically. A hair found inside Nancy Guthrie's home has been secured, bagged, and sent directly to the FBI's most advanced forensic laboratory. Welcome back to Heartbreak Homicides Solved. The Pima County Sheriff's timeline is in the rearview mirror. Today, we are breaking down the breaking news. We are diving deep into the FBI's advanced SNP DNA technology, the terrifying new forensic profile of the suspect, and why this single strand of hair is the ultimate death sentence for the man who took Nancy. The ghost made a microscopic mistake. Let's break it down. To understand the sheer magnitude of Brian Entin's latest report, you have to understand the difference between local police forensics and the federal government when a crime happens in Tucson. The Pima County Sheriff's Department uses local or state labs. They run standard DNA swabs against the CODIS database. If the suspect is a career criminal with a long rap sheet, CODIS gets a hit, but for 76 days, the local labs got absolutely nothing. The operative wasn't in the system. That is why Entin's confirmation that the hair has been sent to the FBI is a total game changer. The FBI does not take on standard evidence processing unless they are deploying technology that local authorities do not possess. When that hair was packaged and shipped out of Arizona, it signaled that law enforcement is no longer looking for a standard fingerprint. They are preparing to build a genetic ghost map of the killer. Think about the violence of the crime scene. The blood on the porch proves Nancy fought back. In a violent struggle, the human body acts like a chaotic shedding machine. Even if the operative was wearing a mask, a hood, and gloves, a single hair from his eyebrow, his arm, or his head, trapped in the sweat of the struggle, is all the FBI needs. But what kind of DNA technique is so advanced that it made national headlines overnight? The FBI isn't just looking for a direct match anymore. They are utilizing advanced DNA techniques, specifically SNP testing and investigative genetic genealogy. Standard DNA testing only looks at 20 genetic markers. It can only tell you if the suspect matches someone already in a police database, but SNP testing looks at hundreds of thousands of markers. It doesn't need the killer to be in a police database. It extracts the DNA from that single hair, sequences the entire genome, and uploads it to public ancestry websites. The FBI doesn't need the operative's DNA on file. They just need his distant relatives. If his third cousin took a DNA test to find out their heritage, the FBI can build a family tree backward, branch by branch, until they land right on the doorstep of the man who jammed those cameras. This is the exact same technology that caught the Golden State Killer after 40 years. And now, the FBI is using it to catch Nancy Guthrie's abductor after 76 days. The ghost operative thought he was untraceable. But right now, his own bloodline is hunting him down. The FBI's advanced DNA sequencing is the weapon. But who exactly is it aiming at? As the hair makes its way to the federal lab, Brian Entin released a second, equally explosive update. He sat down with a leading forensic researcher to build a psychological profile of the operative. And the conclusion they reached is sending shockwaves through the Catalina foothills. This was not a random drifter. This was not a crime of opportunity. The profiler confirmed what independent investigators have suspected for weeks. The suspect is likely someone Nancy Guthrie knew, but here is where the public gets it wrong. When people hear someone she knew, they immediately point fingers at the dinner guests. They point at the son-in-law. But the FBI and the sheriff have already cleared the immediate family.so. If it wasn't her blood relatives, who is the ghost? Criminal profilers call it the tertiary orbit. It is the terrifying reality of the familiar stranger. To execute the 1:47 a.m. camera blackout, the operative needed intimate knowledge of the home's security network. To wait until 1:44 a.m., the operative needed to know the family's exact schedule. This level of detail requires access. Think about the invisible. People who walk through a luxury home every single year. The technician who installed the Wi-Fi router. the contractor who fixed the roof, the landscaper who knows exactly where the blind spots are in the backyard, the medical delivery driver who knows exactly when Nancy's pacemaker data syncs to the cloud. These are people who had a legitimate reason to be on the property in the past. They know the layout of the house. They know the victim is an 84-year-old woman who lives alone. But they fly completely under the radar of a standard police canvas because they aren't part of the family group chat. If the operative is a familiar stranger, he knew his presence on the ring camera would instantly identify him. That is why he wore the heavy tactical gear. That is why he used the signal jammers. He wasn't just hiding his face from the police. He was hiding his face from Nancy because if she saw him, she would recognize him, and this is exactly why the single strand of hair sent to the FBI is a total death sentence for the operative. If you are a contractor, a former employee, or an estranged acquaintance, and the police knock on your door, you can lie. You can give them a fake alibi for the night of February 1st. You can say you were asleep in your bed at 1:44 a.m., but when the FBI knocks on your door, they aren't going to ask for your alibi. They are going to ask for a buccal swab. When the S&P Genetic Genealogy traces the DNA from the crime scene directly to the familiar stranger, the interrogation is over before it begins. The operative will have to explain to a federal judge how a hair from his head ended up inside the home of an 84-year-old woman, mixed into the blood of a violent struggle. Exactly 3 minutes after her security cameras were wiped off the map, the operative's camouflage was perfect. But his biology betrayed him. But while the FBI is building an ironclad genetic trap in Washington, D.C., the local sheriff's department back in Tucson is dealing with a catastrophic leak that threatens to derail the entire case. The familiar stranger spent months planning the perfect blackout. He used a signal jammer. He bypassed the ring cameras. He wore tactical gear to prevent biological transfer. So why, in the middle of this high-tech, military-grade operation, would he leave behind a physical piece of paper? As Brian Entin's reporting continues to peel back the layers of the Pima County Sheriff's investigation, one of the most bizarre and heavily debated pieces of evidence has finally taken center stage: the ransom note. In the immediate aftermath of Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, rumors of a note left at the scene began to circulate. But for criminal profilers, the existence of a ransom note creates a massive psychological contradiction. You do not use a 5 GHz authentication device to blind a Wi-Fi network, only to leave a physical, tangible threat on the kitchen counter. It violates the operative's entire profile. If you want money, you send an encrypted digital message from a burner phone. You don't leave a piece of paper that can be tested for fingerprints, indented writing, and microscopic saliva, unless the note was never meant to collect a ransom. It was meant to buy time. This brings us to a highly specialized branch of the FBI, forensic linguistics. These are behavioral analysts who don't study blood spatter. They study grammar, syntax, and phrasing. They can read a single paragraph and tell you the author's education level, their geographic origin, and most importantly, if they are lying. When analysts look at staged ransom notes written by killers trying to disguise a murder or an abduction as a kidnapping for hire, they look for specific tells. Staged notes usually read like a bad Hollywood script. They over-explain. They use dramatic cliches. And shockingly, in a high percentage of staged crimes, the author attempts to justify their actions or offers a bizarre, out-of-place apology. If the operative is a familiar stranger, a contractor, or a service provider who had been inside Nancy's house before he knew the local police would eventually circle back to him, he needed to point the Pima County Sheriff in the exact opposite direction. The ransom note was a red herring. It was a panicked misdirection designed to make the local cops think a transnational cartel or a professional kidnapping ring had targeted the Catalina foothills. It was designed to send the police chasing phantom getaway cars while the operative quietly blended back into the neighborhood, and for a terrifying few weeks, it actually worked. The operative's misdirection was successful not because he was a genius, but because the local authorities walked right into the trap. Instead of instantly locking down the tertiary orbit of service providers and contractors, the local investigation became bogged down by internal chaos. And this is where Brian Entin's reporting exposes the true tragedy of the first 70 days. The sheriff's department was bleeding trust. The deputies themselves issued an unprecedented 98% no confidence vote against their own sheriff. In the midst of this political civil war, critical details about the crime scene, including rumors of the ransom note, begin to leak to the public when evidence leaks in a kidnapping case. It destroys the concept of holdback evidence. It allows the suspect to monitor exactly what the police know and exactly what they don't. The operative watched the local news. He saw the sheriff struggling. He saw the internet blaming the innocent family. He thought he had successfully beaten the system. He thought the ransom note had thrown the dogs off his scent permanently. He had no idea that while the local sheriff was distracted by a piece of paper, the FBI was quietly sequencing his DNA from a single drop of sweat. The FBI has the DNA. They are building the family tree. But to truly understand how dangerous this familiar stranger is, we have to look at the exact method he used to breach Nancy's home. We have to go back to the timeline. At 1:47 a.m., the security cameras didn't just lose Wi-Fi. According to Brian Entin's timeline analysis and neighborhood reports, there was a localized internet anomaly. When independent investigators first looked at this, they assumed the operative used a handheld signal jammer, a device bought online that floods the area with radio noise. But criminal profilers looking at the service provider theory see something much more sinister. If the operative was a former telecom worker, a utility contractor, or someone with specialized infrastructure access, he doesn't need a signal jammer. He goes straight to the source. He knows exactly which junction box feeds the internet to Nancy's cul-de-sac. He knows exactly which wire to clip or which node to shut down remotely to blind the cloud without triggering an immediate neighborhood-wide alarm. This explains the sheer confidence of the ghost. He wasn't worried about the Ring cameras because he knew the data had nowhere to go. He severed the digital vocal cords of the house. He created a complete artificial blackout. And in that blackout, he made his move. The internet dies at 1:47 a.m. The house is blind. But the forensic evidence tells us exactly what happened next. Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old, but she was not a passive victim. The blood found on the back porch, which Brian Entin heavily reported on, proves that she fought for her life. And it is in this exact moment of violent, desperate resistance that the operative's perfect plan collapsed. When you fight in the dark, your heart rate skyrockets. You sweat. If you are wearing a tactical mask, the friction pulls at your skin and hair. The operative thought that because the cameras were dead, he was invisible. He didn't realize that in the violence of the struggle, Nancy was forcing him to leave a biological signature. She was pulling the evidence right off of him. He won the technological battle. He killed the Wi-Fi. But Nancy won the biological war. Because that single hair he left behind on the floorboards is now sitting under an FBI microscope in Quantico. But there was one more witness the operative forgot to silence. A witness that didn't need the internet to record his crimes. You can cut a fiber optic cable. You can blind a Ring camera. You cannot jam a human heart. Nancy Guthrie wore a pacemaker. As we've covered in our timeline breakdowns, these medical devices act like the black box of an airplane. They log physiological data, heart rate spikes, and physical duress. And crucially, they store that data locally on the device's internal memory before trying to sync to the cloud. Even with the internet completely down, the pacemaker kept recording. It recorded the spike in her heart rate when the operative breached the door. It recorded the physical trauma of the struggle on the porch, and at exactly 2:28 a.m., a full 41 minutes after the internet was cut, it registered its final catastrophic anomaly. The FBI doesn't just have the killer's DNA. They have the exact minute he struck, logged by a medical computer inside the victim's chest. They know exactly how long he was in the house. They have the genetic map of his family tree. The net is closing. And Brian Entin knows that the endgame is finally here. When you lay all of Brian Entin's reporting out on a single timeline, the true scale of this manhunt comes into terrifying focus. This is no longer a local missing persons case. It is a federal digital and biological siege. The operative, the familiar stranger, thought he was smarter than the system. He thought cutting the neighborhood's internet and wearing a tactical mask would make him a ghost. But arrogant criminals always make one fundamental miscalculation. They underestimate the microscopic world. He didn't realize Nancy's pacemaker was a localized hard drive, recording his every move in the dark. And he didn't realize that the violence of the struggle would force him to leave a biological signature, a single strand of hair on the floorboards. The suspect is out there right now. He might be driving a utility truck in Tucson. He might be a contractor working on another house. He watched the local news for 76 days, laughing as the internet blamed the innocent son-in-law, but tonight he isn't laughing, because he knows that his DNA is currently sitting inside the most advanced forensic laboratory on the planet. He knows the FBI is building his family tree. He knows it is no longer a matter of if they will find him. It is only a matter of when .as we cross the 76-day mark. It is crucial to remember why Brian Entin refuses to leave Tucson, and why we refuse to stop analyzing this case behind the tactical gear, the signal jammers, and the DNA sequencing. There is a human tragedy. An 84-year-old mother and grandmother was ripped from her home in the dead of night. Her family was dragged through the mud by the internet, accused of the unthinkable while they were desperately searching for her. They have been officially cleared, but they cannot truly heal, and this community cannot truly sleep until the familiar stranger is in handcuffs. The operative stole Nancy Guthrie, but he will not get away with it. The FBI's science will see to that. The DNA is sequencing right now. The arrest could happen at any moment, but there is one final, terrifying piece of digital evidence that Brian Entin is currently chasing in our next documentary. We are breaking down the ultimate digital dragnet, the geofence warrant. Did the operative leave his burner phone turned on for 1 second too long? How does the FBI force Google and Apple to hand over the location data of every single cell phone that was inside the Catalina Foothills at 1:47 a.m.? And what did they find in the data dump? You do not want to miss this final piece of the puzzle. Hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and get into the comments right now. Based on the familiar stranger profile, who do you think the operative is? A contractor? A medical provider? A utility worker? Let me know your theories. I'm tracking every move Brian Entin makes, so you don't have to. Stay vigilant, and I will see you in the next investigation.